Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Ducks Unlimited podcast. My name is John Gordon. I'll be your host. I'm a senior communications specialist here at Ducks Unlimited. And among my duties, I'm production coordinator of Ducks Unlimited Television. This is a continuing series of podcasts on the 25th anniversary of Ducks Unlimited Television, the longest running show in outdoor TV specific to waterfowl hunting. And joining me today are a couple of guys. One is a son of Wade Bourne, Hampton Bourne, and the other is a former co-host of the show, Mike Checkett. Guys, welcome to the DU podcast.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, John. Good to be here.
Thank y'all very much for joining the podcast. We've been talking to people who've been involved with the show over the years. I've had Mark Pierce and Jared Brown on, and Eric Kessler as well, guys who really at the beginning of the show. And it's been a fun trip down memory lane, thinking back on some of the old episodes and, how far DUTV's come in 25 years. So first I want to go back in time a little bit to 2003, and that's when Wade Bourne made his first appearance on the show. Hampton, do you remember that at all when your dad started doing DUTV?
I don't, John. I don't remember specifically when Dad started DUTV. We have very fond family memories of his first hosting job, which was a show on TNN at the time. We actually didn't have cable television before that, and had always complained about it. And finally, we got cable TV when Dad had a show on cable TV. So it was kind of a nice introduction into the modern age when Dad finally got a show.
That's pretty cool. And your dad was a well-known, person in the outdoor world at that point. He'd been a writer in the outdoor space for a long time, and radio host, television personality. So it was really a great thing for DUTV to have Wade come on board and host some shows and segments. He did better waterfowling tips of the week and things like that really were educational to the audience. And so your dad was a big part of it. Mike, when did you start working with DUTV? What year was that?
Well, that's a good question, John. I think it was 06. I started with DU in 2003, kind of the same time frame with Wade, but I got involved in the TV show first as a guest, and actually with Wade. I went on a trip out to Kansas, and we hunted some reservoirs out there, and playing the role of biologist that I was at that time. And then I think we invited Wade up to hunt with a bunch of us in North Dakota and film the show. And then as a dumb field biologist that talks too much, they just kept putting me in front of the camera and having more and more with that role, and eventually moved to communications from conservation and got, knee deep in the DUTV show.
Yeah, and I think they had your title as media relations biologist, and I always thought that was an interesting title for somebody who started out with a biology background and moved into media relations and communications. It's just around here we've got a lot of biologists and a lot of communications people, not too many crossing over into that deal.
Yeah, I don't think they thought too hard to come up with that title, but it was, I guess, fitting.
I got you. I've watched a lot of the old shows doing research for this podcast series, and Hampton and I watched one recently. It came out in 2004. It was a show that I thought was really cool. It was one of my favorites over the years. Your dad, it starts out at Reelfoot Lake, and it's a place your dad hunted a lot at and really held close to his heart. And the guys were wearing old clothing and shooting old guns. He had his old Model 11, which I believe is your grandfather's gun. Am I correct?
That's right.
And your dad called it the meat gun, which I believe his dad called it. And that's the gun that, of course, brought home the meat. The Model 11, I always thought was a really cool gun. It's a derivative of the Browning A5. It looks exactly the same. You really can't tell the difference in them from the exterior. And, they had a great time there. And then it moved into you and your dad in Alberta with Sean Mann, the goose call manufacturer and guide. And a really great hunt y'all had for, I think it was primarily snow geese. Am I right?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Mostly snows.
I gotcha. I've been chasing snow geese around since I was a kid, and so I always enjoy watching that kind of hunting. You were 16 years old, so what was that like for you to go up to Alberta with your dad and be part of DUTV?
Well, it was great that Dad's job was also my hobby because I got to do some really neat things that a lot of people my age did not get to do. I tell you, one of my biggest takeaways from that trip was how much goes into a show. And what was interesting is people from the outside, myself included prior to that, would think, oh, well, Dad gets to go hunting for a living. How great is that job? And realistically, that hunt in particular, we were hunting mostly out of layout blinds in cut cornfields, and we had to get out to the field early enough to put out all the decoys. Of course, all the guides were scouting the night before, and we had to get out early enough to put out all the silhouettes and full bodies and the blinds. But the thing that you don't account for when you're not used to filming a TV show, which I was not at the time, was how you hide the cameraman. And in a cut cornfield that does not have a lot of vegetation, it's extremely difficult. And our method was to dig a big hole. So we dug a big hole in frozen Canadian prairie ground, big enough for basically a shallow grave that was big enough for a cameraman to sit in and hide in. And I cannot tell you with accurate words how annoying that was to dig the hole. And luckily we had a good hunt. We didn't have to hunt all day to get footage, but by the end of the day we had to come back and shoot voiceovers and shoot B-roll. And later that night we had to go scout for the next day. And of course we had to pick up all the decoys that night too. And by the time it was all said and done, we weren't eating dinner until 8 o'clock at night. And now all of a sudden we've been hunting or working, quote unquote, from which everybody else was working. I will go on record and say that I was the grunt man, unpaid and carrying all the heaviest stuff. And we worked from 3:30 in the morning until 8 o'clock at night and went to bed and did it all again. So that was my introduction to TV production, and it was very different than what I was expecting.
Yeah, and it's true. And I tell you, one big thing that's really helped being able to film a waterfowling show is the advancement in the equipment. Back in those days, we were talking about some really big, heavy equipment that's really transformed these days into some lightweight, compact packages that are a lot easier to hide. So it's not as challenging as it was, but you still have got that element of the guy who's filming the birds, and the shooting has got to be hidden where the birds can't see him, but he still gets really good footage of the birds and all the hunting action. So it's always a challenge trying to figure out what you're going to do. And like I said, that layout blind scenario doesn't lend itself well to, filming a show. I mean, it's a lot easier to do something in a blind. Like you said, that when your dad was at Reelfoot there and, many other hunts, if you've got a way to do it that way in a permanent blind or a semi-permanent structure, it's just a lot easier. And like I say, it's hard for folks to realize all they see is the end result. They don't see all the work that went into it. And, Mike, from your standpoint as well, from somebody behind the scenes putting these shows together, it's a difficult deal to plan something in the middle of the summer and have it all come together 6 months later. So I'm sure you've got some stories about some hunts that probably didn't go as well as you thought it would.
Oh, absolutely. As Hampton mentioned, I got a lot of grief from folks, particularly when I started to get in front of the camera, about how easy my job must be or how great it is. And the work, as you said, you spend all summer lining these hunts up and working with people, and the logistics aspect of it, both, for the hunt between the production company, camera guys, getting the equipment there, decoys. I worked with you and others at Avery at that point to get our sponsors equipment and gear, Whitewater, others. There was a lot of work that went into it before you even arrived on scene. And then you get on scene and nothing will shut down a winning streak like bringing some cameras to a location and trying to film, a duck or a goose hunt. But hiding the cameras was always a challenge, the bird cam in particular, but also inside the blind. and just trying to get quality footage. You just, a guy making a nice shot over the head at 40 yards doesn't look very good on TV. So it's essentially not, worth even taking the shot. And the camera adds 10 pounds, and it also adds, I always tell people, 20 yards to a shot sequence. So if you don't have them in 15 yards, they look like they're, you're sky busting. But it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of work, but a lot of good fun, meeting a lot of great people, seeing some incredible country and the work that Ducks Unlimited was doing around North America, and meeting people and seeing how people waterfowl hunt all over is something I'll never forget.
Yeah, it's like you said, it's amazing how far the shots look on camera, and when they're really within 30 yards and it looks like it's 50. And, it's a challenge to get those birds in the right spot and to where the footage is really exceptional. It's tough all the way around. Filming a waterfowl hunting show has got to be the toughest thing to do in outdoor TV. It's just, as my buddy Pat Pitt says, there's no fences in the sky. So, like you said,
the equipment wasn't as good.
And watch everything disappear.
Yeah, the equipment wasn't as good, 15 years ago either. And it's come a long way, particularly in the last 10 years. But we were lugging around some cameras that weighed 40 pounds at one point. And, if you didn't have it on a tripod, it was going to be unsteady and difficult. Certainly things have improved a little bit in that regard. But I think you're right. It's absolutely the most challenging filming, I think, of any of the genres.
It's got to be. It's easy enough to set up a camera and film elk coming down a mountainside, but you've got 20 Canada geese coming across the field, and you have no idea which way they're going to go or what they're going to do. It's really a skill to be able to catch those birds in the right frame, for really quality footage. And you mentioned something there about Avery. I spent 11 years at Avery Outdoors, and I can remember rigging decoys. For you. Going out, me and Stephen Pitt, and both of us work at DU now, which is kind of crazy. But rigging decoys that were going to appear on DUTV because Greenhead Gear was one of the sponsors of the show, and I just there's been a lot of great sponsors of the show over the years, and just a shout out to everybody who's ever supported DUTV in our current sponsor lineup. Browning Arms, Browning Ammunition, Higdon Decoys, Drake Waterfowl. Everybody's been great in their support of not only DUTV, but, Ducks Unlimited in general. Hampton, your dad was a pretty recognizable figure. He had a great voice, and, he was a guy that people saw on television for years. I mean, when did you first really realize that your dad was a famous guy?
Well, we never really looked at him as a famous guy, and my mother did a good job keeping him humble. My sister and I constantly would badger him about it. And so I think to some degree he always was almost kind of embarrassed at home to see himself on TV when we'd be sitting around, and we always made a big deal out of it and supported him in that. And I tell everybody, Dad was a regular guy. Dad was just a normal guy, and just like we all have talents in life, Dad was good in front of a camera, was good on a microphone, and especially good on a Microsoft Word application. But I think Dad's real skill was being able to relate to people and to be approachable. And Dad always cared, genuinely cared, and that made him very approachable. And, I think the first time that we recognized that he had some level of notoriety, we always teased him for being a Z-list celebrity. He didn't make the A or A down to Y, but he made the Z list. And we were on a family vacation in the airport in California one time, and I was probably a middle schooler, and somebody came up and recognized him in the airport and said hi to him and how much they enjoyed the show. And I remember they had a extended conversation. I'm sure Dad was probably trying to sift through to see if there was any opportunity for a hunting lease somewhere, wherever that guy was from. But nevertheless, it really caught us off guard to see that somebody had recognized him that far away from our home in Tennessee.
Yeah, that's true. I just made my first trip out to California last year, and that was an eye-opening experience hunting the Sacramento Valley up there. It's a pretty neat environment, and one you don't really think of when it comes to waterfowling. And I need to do another show out there in California. We did one in Washington State that was really popular last year. A lot of people don't know that Washington State's got some incredible waterfowl hunting, and that's something too, Mike. I'll talk to you about is, I really try to have a broad spectrum of shows in different locations. We're a North American organization, so you really try to cover that. And do you remember, just some of the different locations you worked on, and putting the other logistics and how the shows turned out and how cool that experience was?
Oh, absolutely. It's like banded ducks. I remember each and every one of them and where I shot them, right? But yeah, in the 6 or 7 years that I was, heavily involved in the TV show, I don't forget any of the shows we went on. But we had some great opportunities. We always tried to focus on areas that were important to waterfowl and our priority one areas, and but also some of the unique places that people may not get to go to. And one of the things both Wade and I agreed on and really liked to do was freelance hunting and not just going to a commercial operation. Nothing against commercial operations, but when you talk to people, and we did, touching on what Wade said, Hampton said, I've traveled with Wade all over North America, and it never ceased to amaze me how many people would recognize him and come up and say hi. You kind of sometimes felt a little like chopped liver when Wade Bourne was in the room, but he always gave him, the time and loved to talk with people because he did relate so well with them. But we had some unique hunts. Thinking back on, one of the most unique ones was up in Yellowknife on the Great Slave Lake, a really critical area in the boreal forest. And Jared Brown and I filmed that show. One of the only places I've ever flown to a duck blind in a helicopter or on a pontoon plane. But Saskatchewan, Alberta, the prairies, we always tried to key in on. We did sea duck hunting. We did geese up in Washington or British Columbia, golden eyes and other divers up in Alaska. We always tried to pick areas that we thought people would be interested in, but then also areas that were important to DU's mission. The Yucatan in Mexico, extremely important to DU Mexico and the work they do down there, and blue-winged teal and other species. We filmed down there a couple times. When the snow goose issue was big, one of the shows Wade and I did together was in Missouri, trying to highlight the new conservation order and how important it was for people to get out and take advantage of that opportunity, but also help conservation by hunting those birds in the spring to help alleviate the overpopulation. So we have DU has a great base. We always weren't shy of people calling and offering their places to hunt or storylines and opportunities. And Wade loved a good story. And so we filmed a lot of those where we went for the hunting, but also the background story of decoy carving or layout boat hunting or, different aspects of how people were hunting and what they were doing, or unique species like greater snow geese up in Cape Tourmente in Quebec. So one of the fond memories I'll always have is just the fact that I got to hunt a lot of incredible places all over North America that many people, may have on their bucket list, but may not get to do that. But we brought them, hopefully, a visual of what hunting those species or those areas look like, and hopefully they enjoyed that.
Yeah, and that's a huge part of what we do at DUTV is really highlight the stories of the volunteers and the donors and the folks out there that really support DU and support wetlands conservation. It's a huge part of what we do. It's a lot more important to me, and I think to a lot of the audience, that we showcase that versus just having great hunting all the time. Really show people what we do on the ground and how we affect waterfowl populations and not just waterfowl populations, but people in general, with clean water, help communities, just really tell the stories behind the scenes of Ducks Unlimited. So anyway, Hampton, do you remember is there any episodes that you ever saw that your dad was in that really stand out in your mind?
Oh man, a lot of them. I think one of the things that I enjoyed the most watching Dad on the show was seeing him in applications that we did not practice on an ongoing basis. It gave me a lot more respect for him as an outdoorsman and as a waterfowler. In particular, Mike was talking about freelancing. I was raised in the boat freelancing, and that was my favorite way to hunt, has been for forever, and that's how I learned to hunt. And seeing Dad do that in a lot of different places in a lot of different ways. I remember one show in particular where he and the guests were hunting out of grass blinds on the Snake River in Idaho. Who even knew that there were ducks in Idaho? But sure enough, it was, according to Dad, one of the best hunts he had ever been on the show was in Idaho. And so I think Mike hit the nail on the head when he was talking about how the show does a really good job of pinpointing different locations that people hadn't thought of and highlighting different methods that people hadn't thought of. And I think there's application for those of us that don't hunt in those areas, even around where we do hunt, to be able to take some of those same tactics and utilize them in the same way. So it was always a highlight to watch Dad, and there are countless. We can do a whole separate episode of this talking about all the different shows I remember, but really a highlight.
Yeah, I did a show 2 years ago in Arizona near Tombstone, which people really loved, because nobody thinks about Arizona and waterfowl, and just showing people how waterfowl are very resilient and that they're spread out all over North America in places you wouldn't even think that there would be a duck or a goose, that there's a thriving population. And so just really I've tried to take people to different places that like I said, you would never even think of. For things like that. And that was a great episode. They even had, their Mexican ducks in a dry wheat field on that show. So that's something that I challenge myself with, is trying to come up with something, that people haven't seen. And I always think about it too, is, what would I like to see on the show? As a waterfowl hunter for over 40 years, where would I like to go? And so it's been a fun part of it for me, for sure. And so anyway, any parting comments you guys have about DUTV and what it's meant to you?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, it was just a great experience for me to be able to travel around North America and meet just unbelievable people, our volunteers and staff, and hunt with them and get to see the things that we got to see, along with the hosts, Jared Brown, Mark Pierce, Wade Bourne, Huntley Ritter. All those guys were a lot of fun to be around. And just thinking back on shows, the ones that probably the most people come up to me, and I think maybe even Wade at one time, was the freelance shows that we did when we loaded up the truck, 18 duck decoys and a handful of full bodies and 2 layout blinds, Drake the DU dog and Elvis, in freelance from Alberta to Manitoba. And we spent 29 days on the road together. And I don't know how many thousands of miles we spent, but you get to know somebody pretty well when you spend some time like that.
You probably deserved an award for that, by the way.
Oh no, it was the award's all. I mean, the benefit was all mine. We had a lot of help, of course, from DU staff and volunteers, along the way, but some pretty amazing memories. Probably one of the best duck hunts I've ever been on in Saskatchewan with Wade and I, on a small pond, where we turned a morning that was foggy and weren't even going to be able to hunt, into an incredible hunt the next day just by scouting and seeing some ducks in one spot and having a Canadian farmer say, well, that's okay, and you can hunt there, but there are a lot more ducks over here behind the barn. And, and we ended up having an incredible shoot there. So, the memories are, I remember them all, but too numerous. We could sit here and talk for 3 hours and tell some of those stories. And I enjoyed hunting with Hampton and Wade, redoing the show they originally did up in Alberta with Sean Mann. And it was neat watching Hampton, who I think you were in your 20s at that point, maybe had just graduated from college or getting ready to, and watch Wade and his son hunt together. And, that gave me a lot of excitement for, what I will, experience with my sons. At that point I was single and didn't have any kids, but I, obviously married and with 3 now, but it was a great time. There's a season that doesn't go by I don't think about Wade and the other guys and traveling around the country and wishing maybe I could go back and do it, but that's more of a young man's game these days.
Yeah, and I'll piggyback too and say that Dad had written for the magazine prior to becoming involved with the show, but I wouldn't necessarily say other than members, than being just a Ducks Unlimited member, that Dad was super involved with the organization at that time beyond writing for the magazine. And by the time Dad reached the end of his career and ultimately passed away, I think I would consider him to be super involved with the organization. And a lot of the volunteer things that he did in excess of what was quote unquote required, those things probably would not have happened if not for the show. And Ducks Unlimited as an organization, the employees, the people, the members, the volunteers all around the country have really impacted our lives in a lot of different ways. And it's in hindsight very fortuitous that Dad found Ducks Unlimited TV and that he was an available TV show host when they came calling. It was really a blessing for us.
Well, appreciate that, Hampton. Your dad was such a big part of it, and he's sorely missed around here. What a guy! I mean, he was a true champion of conservation. And one thing I've heard said a lot around the halls of DU before is that people come for the mission, but they stay for the people. And the folks that I've met and worked with since I've been here since 2018, some of the best people I've ever known in my life. So it's been a great experience. So anyway, in conclusion, thanks guys for joining me today and talking a little DUTV. It's been a lot of fun. Also, if anybody wants to know a little bit more about Wade and his background, I did a DU film with Hampton and Wade's wife. She escapes me. What's your mother's name again, Hampton?
Becky,
that's right. I did a really nice film called Wade. It's simply titled, and you can see that at ducks.org. Just like I say, go to the media tab at the top of the homepage and drop down on DU Films, and you can find that film with a lot of other short films that we've done about waterfowl and the people behind it. So anyway, thanks again, guys. Enjoyed it, and tune in for some more DU podcasts. We're going to continue this with, we're going to have more podcasts coming up celebrating the 25th anniversary of DUTV.